Hey everybody, this is Perch. I don't know that this is a hot take. Maybe this is a hot take. You can decide. But I was reading some articles talking about Star Wars, and in particular, kind of the favorite thing people like to do about Star Wars right now is where it all went wrong. So where did Star Wars start to become a mess? Where did it lose all the fan base? And there's lots of theories on that. More than I thought. I thought that there was pretty much a very large camp that kind of points to the Rian Johnson film, but there's actually multiple factions of this. When you get over the obvious one, when you wander outside of your group, what you discover is there's lots of little battles going on around Star Wars. But one of the intriguing ones that came up is it immediately reminded me of conversations I've had in the comic store, and it reminds me of one of the irritations I have when in DC in particular decides to explain too much about what's going on, when they do a crisis to help explain kind of their convoluted continuity. The answer to in the comics space is, hey, maybe just don't worry about some of that stuff. Hey, maybe you made a continuity error. Please don't do it, every single day, and please don't, you should have the comics more or less feel aligned. In the 80s, when a lot of people credit Jim Shooter as being this, right on top of it, editor, keeping things in line, the comics were in sync with each other and everything else, they felt that way. They did, but they weren't. There were definitely some continuity errors in the Jim Shooter time. There were plenty of them. They just didn't feel egregious. They didn't feel like they were happening every comic, and they didn't feel in your face. The stuff that they would focus on was, hey, if this writer is using a villain in the comic, we're going to give that villain at least 2 or 3 months of padding before we let the villain be used in a different comic. We're going to protect that a little bit. If a character gets injured or has a major status quo change, like for example, if the Thing has to wear a helmet because Wolverine clawed open his face or whatever it happens to be, we're going to make sure that if he is in another comic, he's represented the same way. They didn't catch it 100%, but they got close. And that was what worked for readers. Now, what comics often do, though, is that they focus less on that, but instead they decide to focus on, if the Flash was able to travel to Earth 2 using this mechanism, and then he had to travel to Earth 4 using this other mechanism, why did he have to run in a different way for each? They focus on the minutia that you argue about in comic shops, but 99% of comic fans do not care. And the ones that do care, that are arguing, actually enjoy the argument. They don't really want a solution to that problem. So what does this have to do with Star Wars? Well, the argument is, Star Wars is a movie. It's certainly a licensable product. It's books and comics and everything else. There's a Star Wars entertainment franchise there. And this is maybe a hot take. I'm very curious to see who really disagrees with this take and who doesn't. But Star Wars isn't meant and was never meant to be a religion. It was not meant to be an alternate version of science. It wasn't meant to be something that needed laws and explanations and in-depth analysis. It was meant to be entertainment. Whether you're watching it or reading it or whatever you happen to do, you're meant to be entertained. And in many cases, decisions made in the Star Wars films, especially the earlier ones, were made to entertain you. When Luke is using the Force to hurl around trash and other things, that was a for lack of a better word, a stunt. That was meant to look cool. It wasn't meant to introduce the concept of physics to trash-based items. And like when I'd hear people argue about, hey, how big of an item can you use the Force on? Yoda kind of spells it out in Empire Strikes Back. It's like what you believe. Like your size is not the issue. It's what you believe you can do, which is another way of saying you can move whatever looks cool for you to move. If you had a cool sounding movie where somebody could use the Force to move a planet around, hell, go for it. Yeah, if you could, if you could use the Force to, grab a spaceship and fly it into another spaceship. I mean, hell, why, if we had good Force users, you could argue, I remember this argument in a comic shop, if Ben Kenobi was an amazing Force user, why didn't he just, pilot a drone type robot into the Death Star to, unlock the tractor beam and everything? Why'd they get up and walk around the Death Star? He didn't need to. He could just kind of do it all remotely. These powers kind of come and go depending on if they look cool on the screen. And that ultimately is what Star Wars is. It means that there's going to be inconsistencies. A thing that looks cool in one scene is going to be rendered impossible in another scene. That's going to happen too. It's not meant to be more than that. And that's okay. And when it comes to comics, the same thing comes. It's don't let trying to adhere to some kind of crazy continuity or logic or science get in the way of entertainment. It should still be entertaining. That is rule number one. As opposed to, what DC seems to do every time they decide they need a new crisis. It's like, let's clean everything up and explain the multiverse. We'll make the linear verse. Most people don't appreciate those explanations. It gives them something to argue about. In fact, the more you do it, the more gaps you have. I always laugh when Dan Didio at one point? It's like, yeah, we're going to clean all this stuff up. No, you're going to make it worse. You're actually better off by ignoring it. You're better off just letting the arguments happen in the comic shop about the inconsistencies you have and focusing on what Shooter did in the 80s, which was, hey, are the characters being used properly? Hey, are we overdoing anything by using the characters too much? Hey, if somebody picks up this comic, is it going to more or less align with this other comic? That's the continuity and the structure that was cared about. And that was a better, saner, cleaner, all-around smarter world. This idea that, and I know for a lot of people, things like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or Marvel and DC Comics or any of these other properties, they become more than what they were intended to be. They were intended to be entertainment. If the movie failed to entertain you, then it failed. It doesn't really matter if it failed to entertain you because of continuity errors or because of this or that. It's pretty binary. Was it enjoyable sitting and watching it on the screen? This was kind of the flaw, I think, the core flaw, but I don't see a lot of people talking about it in Rian Johnson's movie. People wanted to draw political ideology to it, and they wanted to talk about Rey being a Mary Sue, and there's all these other elements. But the question you have is, hey, the majority of this movie, Star Wars, big budget, intending to be a $1 billion movie, and it did make a ton of money. It was basically a space representation of the O.J. Simpson car chase down the road. It was the rebels were in a ship for, 75% or more of that movie. That's what you got. We had a slow-moving spaceship chase while one of the spaceships was about to run out of gas and couldn't get to where it needed to get before it ran out of gas. Then there was a side quest off to a Las Vegas planet, and then finally they went over to this white sand, red sand planet. Like, that wasn't that... I mean, the challenge you had there is that the movie just didn't have a lot to get excited about. I'm sorry. I think that's the core issue. There were some cool scenes, and I think when people watch it later, they tend to fast forward to the scene. Nobody is sitting through the long, Holdo Poe argument while the spaceships are slowly trundling through the cosmos. Nobody's doing that. They will fast forward to the, hey, let's hyperspace jump one ship into the middle of another ship and show crap blowing up all over the place. That looks cool. Does that make any sense? Probably not. I think the idea that you could just speed jump a ship into another ship probably has tons of scientific and other issues, but it looked interesting, stuff blowing up. That's ultimately what the movie's all about. I know people like to attach deeper meanings in things, whether they're movies or comics or everything else, but you do need to remember that at the end of the day, the purpose of these things is to be entertaining. And so that's going to mean they're going to make logical misses. They're going to do things for spectacle rather than logic. These aren't science books. At no point in Al Ewing's Guardians of the Galaxy should it be explaining the exact impacts of of physical space travel on the human body and what it would mean to the physiology. I'm like, no, nobody wants to see that. Nobody should be seeing that. That's not what the comic is intended to do. Comics are intended to be light, popcorn level entertainment, just like Star Wars was. Again, I know there's other reasons why people are upset at Star Wars. There's lots of, there's lots of commentary around it. But I think 30 years from now, I suspect people are going to be looking back at these movies and they're going to go, was it entertaining? Does this hold my interest? That's the challenge. If you ever want to kind of test some of this stuff, take some of these movies and show it to kids. I have my 2 daughters here. If you have kids under 12 and you show them something, it actually cuts through a lot of these arguments and concepts very quickly, and you get to, did this hold their interest or not? Like real fast. It's a great test. The reality is a lot of these properties that have failed, and then I'll hit another hot button one. Ghostbusters, not Ghostbusters 2, Ghostbusters 3, Ghostbusters, the all-female version wasn't in the same reality as the other one, or maybe, or who knows. That Ghostbusters, the remake. What was it? Ghostbusters Sound the Charge, Lead the Charge? I don't remember. Anyway. Was it funny? It's meant to be a action comedy, mostly comedy. Was it funny? Did it have enough action? Lots of people argued about it, if it's right to have all women in the movie. Does it, what about the PC element of it? Oh no, is this film too woke? Everything else. Fine questions. It's fine to, again, those are great arguments in a comic shop that people can have. But it didn't make a lot of money. Was it funny? Was it entertaining? For some, yeah. But for the masses, did it accomplish its core goal? Based on the box office numbers, no. I'll use the other one to piss off more groups. Captain Marvel, a movie that lots of people complained about. Did it appeal to normie people who just want to see a light popcorn superhero film? Seemed to. Made a lot of money. I know the whole Disney lied about the money, but it got people into the box office because they were interested in a lighthearted superhero movie that didn't make them think very much and may or may not have tied into the big Avengers tentpole films. That's what it was intended to do. Anyway, I think that in a lot of cases, like I said, we get into arguing about these films and comics and everything else. We assign meaning to them where they don't exist. If you want to have a crazy conversation, talk to some faithful who has literally made Star Wars a religion for them. They are all into the science and the physics and the chemistry of Star Wars, of the logical. When those arguments would break out in the comic shop, I always hated those because it would be, and you would see in the faces of others listening in, those people are lunatics. They're like, they're way too into this stuff. And it's Star Wars, it's Star Trek, it's the Lord of the Rings franchise. There are people who seem to have forgotten at some point that it is meant to be entertainment, and because it's meant to be entertainment, there will be flaws. There will be decisions made for spectacle rather than substance. And that's, it is what it is. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Like I said, I think I'll get some people who hard disagree with this, but, is it entertaining becomes a very interesting bar for people to either hit or not. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.